Now, I don't know about you, but when it comes time to put the finish on a project, everything else in my shop comes to a grinding, screeching halt. I don't have a separate room or place to do my finishing work, so I have to stop sawing and building. I have to let the dust settle and wait until the finish is completely dry on my project before I can get back to work building something else. I've tried a lot of things. I've put plastic sheeting up to make a type of tent, but that was always in the way and only partly effective. I've tried putting a coat of finish on at night, last thing before I leave the shop, but depending on the finish, that might not be fully dry by morning. Another day in the shop wasted. I've even tried doing my finishing work inside the house, and that didn't go over well at all. Bottom line though, my shop time is just way too valuable to waste it waiting for a finish to dry. I need a way to let finishes cure in a dust-free area and still be able to go about the business of building things. Well, they say that necessity is the mother of invention. Now, like all my shop projects, I did start with a list of design considerations. First off, I need it now, so whatever I make needs to be fast and simple to build. It also needs to be made of inexpensive and readily available materials. I'd like it to be easy to set up when I need it and easy to knock down and store when I don't. I want it to be somewhat scalable in size so it can handle different size projects. And when I do knock it down for storage, it needs to be light enough that I can move it around easily. And of course, most importantly, it needs to be dust tight so those little specks of dust don't get embedded in my finishes. I started with the idea of just building a frame box. I could put a small project inside, lower the box over the top, and my project could dry while I went about my business of building something else. But lifting a box off and putting it back over a project seemed like a lot of trouble and might even stir up more dust. And what about bigger projects? Maybe I could make it expandable. Maybe I could build it out of panels that could be added or subtracted as needed to change the size and shape of the enclosure. Now we might be onto something. What about taller projects? Could I stack the panels? Maybe. A seed of an idea is about to germinate. All right, the first step in this little project is to go to the lumber yard or the home center store and get some 2x4s. And that's going to be problematic. You're not going to find really good 2x4s. They're hard to find these days. This one could probably use it to make a rocking horse out of. But what we're trying to do is we're trying to get pieces that are at least 30 inches long. And it's better to cut these a little overlong. So I'm shooting for 31 inches. And I'm trying to find spots on these boards that are 31 inches long without any seriously ugly knots in the edge of the board, so that I can run it through the jointer and get a decent edge on the board. So far, I've been cutting for a while here, and I've managed to get an average of about 2 31-inch lengths out of each 8-foot 2x4. Okay, well, there's one out of an 8-foot board, and we'll just keep looking. Okay, so the next step is to take these boards that we've just cut and to joint one edge flat and square, and then joint one face flat and square. So I'm going to do that now. Now, when you're jointing this, what you want to do is you want to go far enough down that you take off the radius corner on the 2x4. So we want to get good square, sharp corners. Okay, after you've got two square corners, now you can set this aside and we're going to run it through the planer. When I brought these 2x4s home from the home store, I stacked them in the shop for about a week to let them dry a little bit more. They're pretty wet. Now what we've done is we've kind of cut them a little oversized to length, and we've milled one edge square, one face square. Then I flipped them over and ran the other face through the planer. Now I've stacked these loosely now, and I'm going to let them acclimate for one more day. Probably about halfway through, I'll flip them around and restack them, but I've kind of got them stacked here with some airspace. Then we'll finish milling them, and we'll move on to the next step. All right, after milling one edge square and both faces, and then letting the board sit overnight, now what I'm going to do is I'm going to rip off the sort of ragged edge over here on the other side. Now I'm ripping this to 2 7/8 inches. Actually, what's going to happen is we're going to glue these up in pairs, and we're going to continue to mill until we get 2.5 inch square blocks that will cut to exactly 30 inches long. But by cutting this at 2 7/8, it gives me a little extra space. So if I get glue squeeze out along the edge, don't have to spend a whole lot of time cleaning it up. I can just run it through the jointer or the planer and it'll be good to go. So we're ready to rip. All right, so after ripping these down to 2 7/8, I have not cut them to length yet. It's going to be easier to do that after we glue them up. Going to glue these up in pairs, but I'm going to do them all at one time. I took a couple of minutes and I just went through and turned these to try to get the better looking side of the 2x4 facing out, like right there. Not that it really matters, but it's a good practice and good habit to be in. So I'm ready to glue. This is a great way to use up any glue that might be a little hinky in your shop. Maybe it's been sitting around for a while. So what I've done is I've dumped it all into a bowl. I've got a chip brush here, and I'm just going to pour this on and glue these pieces up, like I said, in pairs. And there's my first pair. Just drop that in there. I'll try to keep one end semi-even. See the ugly side facing to the inside? Put a couple of clamps across the top just to be safe, and we're good to go. Okay, you'll be undoubtedly pleased to know that milling all this 2x4 stock was the longest step in the process. What we have now is a whole bunch of pieces that are exactly 2.5 by 2.5 inches square. All I got to do is just cut them to length. I'm going to trim off these ends flush all the way across. I'm going to set up a stop block and cut all these to 30 inches long. After cutting the legs to length, I've set those aside. We still got a couple of things to do with those, but I'm going to let those sit aside for a little bit and get started on the 1x2s. Now, if you think it was hard to find some good 30-inch lengths of 2x4, you haven't seen anything yet. Wait until you open up your bundles of 1x2s. Now, I just buy the unbroken bundles. Around here, there are 15 pieces in each bundle, and in the long run, it's easier to do it that way. Plus, if you unwrap the bundles at the store and start trying to pick through and find decent 1x2s, by the time you get them home, they're going to be warped anyway. So get them on back to your shop, cut the bundle, and start cutting before they start twisting like spaghetti. You're going to need a whole bunch of 30-inch length 1x2s, so I started cutting those first. Need 16 of them for the tops and bottoms of the panels if you build the same number of panels I've built for this project. And you're going to need another dozen that are going to get ripped in half. Now, you might think you can get away with 28, but some are going to get messed up, either in the ripping or you're going to find that they're just not good enough. Even though you've been careful to cut out the best parts, they're just not going to be good enough for your project. So cut a bunch extra. I've done that. I think now I've got enough. So what I want to do is try to keep these from warping until I'm ready to use them. And what I've done is I've stacked them as neatly and tightly as I can. And I've got this, some people call it plastic twine. It's basically shrink wrap on a roll. It's available almost any place. A lot of moving supply departments will have this. And what you want to do is once you get it started, then you want to go around it just as tight as you can possibly go. And this will help to hold these boards straight until you're ready for the next step of the project. Now I'm going to wrap this at both ends and in the middle, and then I'm going to set this bundle aside and I'm going to start cutting the other pieces that I need for the project. Okay, for our frames we're going to do a real simple butt joint, and we want our frames to be 30 inches by 30 inches. Now we've got our 30-inch pieces cut, and those will be the tops and bottoms of the frames. What we need to do now is figure out how long to make the side pieces so we get perfectly square frame. Easiest way to do that is simply take your tape measure, put the 30-inch mark next to the second piece of wood, and then look over here and see 28 5/8 inches. That's how long the side pieces need to be. All right, now we want to assemble our panels quickly, but we want to make sure we're assembling them square and flat. Easiest way to do that is to make some sort of little jig to help out. This is nothing but a scrap of plywood. This is the key right here. This piece of plywood is cut 1/64 of an inch less than 14 inches. And you'll see why that distance is important. I have nailed this down to the top of this board, and so to assemble one of our panels, we simply take one of our 30-inch top or bottom pieces, one of our 28 5/8 inch pieces. That looks pretty ragged. I'm going to dab a little glue here on the end of this. I'm going to put this next to this piece of plywood and square it up with the top piece. And I'm going to put a couple of 18 gauge nails. These are 1.25 inches long. Can be plenty. Hold it till the glue sets. Now I'm going to take another 28 5/8 inch piece for the center support. I'm going to dab a little glue on that. Put that up here next to the other end of this plywood. push everything up tight, square, hold, nail. Now, I'll flip this over, using again this piece of wood to register everything. Another piece of our 28 5/8 inch stock. And we'll have the third leg, third vertical support of our panel in place. And put in a couple of nails. Now, I'll flip the entire assembly over. Registering again off of this piece of plywood here. That is making up my little jig. Take another 30-inch piece of wood, and this time I'm going to dab glue on all three pieces of wood. Put this into place. Perfect. And there we are. About 3 minutes to assemble each frame. Okay, now we need to build a total of 8 of those panels. And in the next video, we're going to build 4 slightly different panels that will be our hinge panels. That's what's going to allow us to open up the finishing enclosure and put what we're finishing inside in a dust-free environment. So in the next video, we'll finish making the legs, we're going to cover the panels, we're going to attach the hinges. We're going to move along on this project pretty good, so I'll look forward to seeing you in the next video. Thanks for watching.